Woo, one of the craziest things you'll ever hear in your life. And one of the strangely, perhaps almost, well, no, I can't hold it against the baby, but one of the weird, it's so weird. If you ever hear a German baby just like, screaming, no, 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 but it doesn't say no, 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 right? It says nine, 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 nine. I mean, it's just, you know what that sounds like. And it's when you hear a little baby doing it, I don't know, there's something strangely cute, but also like kind of it reminds you of things perhaps that the entertainment industry has ever put upon you in the past. And you know what I mean? So anyway, it's just 999, like they don't want the bottle or trying to get away from their parents or something, all of which is, well, anyway, wild. So not going to explain right now how exactly I heard that, but regardless, you are getting your Q&A, your Zomia ONE Underground Q&A. A little late this week. I announced that on Twitter earlier in the week that it'd be a little, that this would be coming later on. Just had some travel and things that made it. It just made it that I couldn't get to it until this weekend. But here it is. You are getting it. We've got some great questions to get into, and we're going to run the gamut on this one. We have some tech questions. We do have some entertainment questions, and we also have kind of a scientific / religious question that I think is, I think that could create a very interesting conversation and a great album of the week to get into as well. So plenty to cover here over the next, we'll see if we hit an hour, but, actually, the last question, I could do an entire series on that, but, we'll try and keep this all in line. So anyway, why don't we go ahead and break into it? And we'll open this one up with a question that, I'm surprised no one's ever asked me about this stuff before, but maybe I'm kind of hopeful, and this is in no way an insult towards the question asker, but that I'm hoping is that just more people had, my audience would be pretty intelligent about this. So anyway, let me read it here. And I guess maybe there are people who don't know that this is a thing. It is a thing. I remember an article, maybe in 2015 that Vice did where they covered some of this. And that actually prompted me to look more into it. And really, this is something that could only exist because of cryptocurrencies. So anyway, let's talk about it. I mean, it could exist otherwise, but it only really worked because of cryptocurrencies and really because of, Tor and all that. Anyway, let's read the question here. Hey, Stallion, recently saw on the hidden Wiki that there are money services on Tor all right, I'm going to stop there for a second. The hidden Wiki, for those that don't know. Now, I espouse regularly that people use Tor. In fact, if you want to, use it fucking 24/7. Make it, your daily, like that is the internet that you access on a daily basis. I am a huge fan of Tails. I recommend using it every time. Anytime there's a new update for Tails, I mention it on Sovereign Tech because I am trying to get the world on this. Tor is it's not a perfect way that an interconnected world computer network or global computer network should work, but it's better than what we have. Certainly it's not perfect, but then also it's far better than the internet as it stands, the World Wide Web as it stands. So big fan. And I use it basically in a very daily driver sense. And I use Tails as often as I can as well. So the hidden Wiki is really, it's not like Wikipedia, but the basic idea is that it is a front page for Tor. Okay. And it's supposed to link you to all of the handy and wonderful different services that exist on Tor, or what gets called in various entertainment media, or, not just entertainment, but media in general, what gets called the dark web, right? Like it's some kind of evil fucking thing. I'm going to mention, I'm going to lay down a certain, shall we say, a axiom here. Okay. Before we get to the rest of the question, understand this, anything that's on Tor is also on the, what you call the, the open web, the clear web. I mean, it's not, I wouldn't call it the open web because it's not open. We're trying, people are certainly working on making the World Wide Web as we know it more open, as in open source and transparent, etc. But we're not there. But anyway, the normal World Wide Web that you're used to accessing every day, that so many different, the Twitter resides, a lot of different things reside on. Anything on Tor is also available there. You just got to know where to look. Okay. I mean, just understand that this dichotomy, this idea that, all this bad shit only happens on Tor, is ridiculous. It's just not true. But that said, of course, a lot of people do consider that this stuff, or, generally they think that's where you have to go. And certainly the media, be it the entertainment industry, news organizations, whatever, they make it sound like, this is the only place that this kind of shit exists. That's ridiculous. And you could think of the most abhorrent things, and certainly there are abhorrent things on Tor, as well as on, the World Wide Web, as it were, on the major internet. I mean, Tor still uses the internet, basically, right? That's why I'm kind of using the word World Wide Web, because, of course, HTTP, www, that's just one protocol, right, of the internet. The internet has multiple protocols that use it, SMTP, IRC, Usenet, and so on. And, Tor as well. They all use the same, infrastructure. So you have to differentiate on that. But I just want to make that abundantly clear, including what we're going to talk about here with this question. Again, all of this is available right on, the World Wide Web as you know it. Okay. You do not need Tor for this. People, this demonization of what is known as the dark web is one of the most insidious things that the media does, because it, in a certain way, keeps people from thinking that, or from even wanting an encrypted, a more secure internet overall, frankly. And I mean, it really does. And so that's a very real problem. Okay. So anyway, let's keep reading the question here, or I'll start from the beginning again. How about that? Hey, Stallion, recently saw on the hidden wiki that there are money services on Tor where you can buy discounted site gift cards, stolen credit cards, and even cleaned money, quote unquote, cleaned money. Some of which I guess basically means quote unquote counterfeit, even though I'd argue any government issued money is counterfeit effectively, at the end of the day of it. But reading on with the question, some of their prices are a little, oh boy, folks, I haven't gotten a whole lot of sleep this week, so you'll have to pardon me. Anyway, continuing. Some of their prices are a little steep. Let's see, a height only matched by how much of a scam they might be. I'm glad that you recognize that. That's why I didn't say you were an idiot. But anyway, any thoughts on these? Are they even remotely legit? Seems like a great way to make some money, like with emptying PayPal accounts to your own when times are tough. No. These are not legit. These are scams through and through. When I first read about them back in, like I said, this is about 2015. It's a very famous article where I think they were talking to it sounded like, I think the guy even said he was a very young guy in like Australia or maybe New Zealand. And he was selling, I think he wasn't doing like the PayPal account thing. I think he was selling some kind of online gift cards for whatever stores, I don't know, eBay, whatever it is. And he would, he'd sell them at a lower price and then would effectively email you, a code. Like, for example, you'd spend $250 in Bitcoin. Certainly at the time, that was, the premier, and I mean, it's always going to be the premier. Well, I don't want to say always, because you never know what the future holds, but it's going to be the king for a long time, folks. Okay. It was then, it is now. You'd spend $250 in Bitcoin, and then you'd get a $500 Amazon gift card, for example, in return. And this would be done on Tor. In fact, in the article, it's funny, the guy brings up, to Vice and says, in fact, this is so easy to do, and you can so readily, get your hands on this stuff. This guy that sells these gift cards, for Bitcoin at a discount, basically said he debates whether or not law enforcement is as good as the entertainment industry shows, because how are they not catching these people? Or maybe they don't care. Now that gets into a big conversation around who does any government, any authoritarianism around the world actually prosecute. And I'm not going to get into that conversation too much here, okay? But basically, I think governments, I mean, I will just say this much. Governments around the world, I mean, they're criminals in and of themselves, but they rely upon a certain private criminality to go on to actually survive. And I mean, there are broad ramifications of that. There are very easy, no-brainer examples of this. I'm not going to get into that, but let's be clear, as I've said before in the past, when the government goes after somebody for a certain something, and yet you know there are other people who are doing far worse, and you're not even the government or the FBI researching the matter, you just know because it's such public knowledge. They go after figureheads. Okay, the government goes after figureheads. The average everyday criminal can get away with shit, I mean, in many ways, all day long. That's a whole other conversation, though, to get into. Let's stick with this. So yeah, there's a lot of these. They are still around. In fact, if you look on the hidden wiki, it's outrageous. And I would almost argue, now the hidden wiki is not moderated. I think you can just like submit to that, and it keeps getting a new URL all the time. And this is one of the potential issues with a Wild West version of the web, which is very much what Tor is, just with a lot of anonymity and security baked into it, all of which are fine and dandy things. I'm not arguing against any of that. I am warning. Okay, I am telling you to be careful. Because the hidden wiki, I would almost argue isn't, I mean, it's cool. There's some really cool stuff on that site, and there are some, it can definitely lead you to some great things. I mean, because you have very few search engines. You have maybe 2 or 3 that are really worth their salt. DuckDuckGo does a fairly okay job of being a search engine for Tor. There are a couple other ones out there. The hidden wiki can lead you to some legitimate stuff. But overall, it's not a worthwhile thing to look at. And there's a problem that almost the very first thing that you get to when you go to the hidden wiki are these money services. And I'm telling you, every single one that it lists off is a scam. Every single one of them. I tested these out a few years ago just to see what would happen. Okay. And every one of them, I never got a return. Never once. So yeah, if they have a website, they are all scams. In fact, you can go through the ones right now. Go through it because, just when I got this question, I'm like, all right, let's check again. You can go through the ones that are just listed off on the hidden wiki. And you'll find sites, supposedly different sites that have the claim, because on the hidden wiki, right, there's a little description next to it that says, oh, we have the best cloned credit cards, we have the best PayPal accounts and all stuff, and you can drain this PayPal account for free, no worries there. You'll get, actually, if you give us an extra 15%, we'll convert it into Bitcoin for you, blah, blah, blah. And you could go to like 2 or 3 of them, and they'll all be the same exact site. And then you go to the reviews part to try and make them look legit. And all the reviews are exactly the same, just with a different name in it. I mean, it's abundantly clear that these things are scams. Now, I mean, and a lot of people want to, the most reasoned argument that people make of how they know these are scams without even like trying them or looking into them is that they will basically, they'll say, well, wait, if they can like just drain PayPal accounts, or they have cloned credit cards or whatever, that they can, why don't they just take the money and run? Why would they sell it to you? Now, that's not a bad bit of logic. However, there is a genuine response to that. And here's the thing. So if you go to a Silk Road-esque website, and you know what I mean? If you go to, like a marketplace website of some kind. Now, don't go to, because there's some of these, like like Deep Market Web, and some of these other ones. Like, they'll look like they're kind of a Silk Road copycat, but they're not. Okay. If you know of a place that sells all kinds of shit that's basically the eBay of Tor, you know what I mean? Okay. That people like used to use the Silk Road for, or Alphabet, whatever. If you go to one of those, now on those sites, there might be people that will legitimately, quote unquote, as in they will actually give you something in return. There may be people that will sell these gift cards. Okay, those services do exist, but those are the only places that they exist. And for good reason, because, that way they're not in any way on the hook or responsible for, any of the back end of the website and all of that, just in case anyone ever goes to shut it down. It's the safest way for them to do business. So on those sites, yes. Also, you're going to notice that the returns aren't as crazy. Like, it's not like, because some of these bullshit websites, and look, you got to understand how deep they go with this. They'll create they'll say, oh, we offer escrow. Oh, we have, we have customer service, guaranteed money back, and all this stuff. And they'll even have a messaging system built into the site. Like one in particular is Deep Market Web. They have this whole setup, and they will not give you shit. They are an absolute scam, but they make it look really good. Not only that, there are other sites that they will say is a review site for some of these services, not just the Hidden Wiki, but others that are claiming which ones are real and which ones are not. Okay. And on those, they'll say, oh yeah, they're real, but really that's just run by the same people that are setting up all these sites as a scam. That's how deep it goes, is you think that there's reviews for this and all this shit when it's total horseshit. They'll say that you can leave reviews on it. Your reviews will never get left. They set up the form. Okay, the webpage for the form for you to be able to do it, but then it'll never go if you try and say that it's a scam. And believe me, I've tested this, and understand, like a lot of them, that's the thing is, in fact, the emailer mentions this, that what they ask for, well, some of these sites, what they'll do is they'll say, okay, you have to create a wallet on our site, a Bitcoin wallet on our site. Send us that. You have to have at least $35 in your wallet. So you basically have to send them at least $35. That's without even buying anything. That's just sending it to their site. That should raise all your alarms should be going off already at that point, right? But then also what they'll do is they will, then they'll say, okay, this one costs at least this much, and it'll always be kind of not high dollars and thousands of dollars, though certainly they will offer, some kind of clone credit cards or counterfeit money or whatever for that amount. But they will offer, they'll say, well, we have a minimum order of like $100 or something like that. So you're going to get parted with at least $100, and then you never hear from them. And again, you can try and use their customer service. In fact, one site I saw, I remember it said something like, we'll be in touch with you in a week. And then you got scammed. None of these sites are legit. Like I said, if you know of a site where you have bought product before and it's come to you, on there, maybe there are some legitimate players, okay, that are actually offering, perhaps, frankly, they would sell printed or, counterfeit money or something along, or, wash bills, whatever. Maybe they'll offer some of that. Maybe they would offer some clone credit cards. Maybe they would offer PayPal accounts that you could drain. Here's the rub with the PayPal accounts. Okay. And this is where that logic because if you go to these sites, they're going to give you this argument that, look, we can't use all the credit cards. We can't drain all the PayPal accounts. So we sell them. Here's the argument of where, and you think that doesn't make any sense, but it does. And here's the rub, is that you can actually buy, again, only on those sites that are actually an entire marketplace where you've bought physical goods and other stuff, okay? Again, Silk Road-esque sites that obviously still exist. Here's the rub, is that with those PayPal accounts, people do sell these. As soon as you transfer, because what they'll do is they'll give you the username and password for this PayPal account. And it's usually just somebody else's PayPal account. As soon as you take that money out, what you're going to do is you're going to transfer it to another PayPal account, right? As soon as you do that, you have to transfer that money out of there or spend it. And then you lose that PayPal account because PayPal catches on, somebody complains, and the PayPal account that the money got shifted to just gets shut off. So you have to, if you want to even try this, if you were trying to like make a living, like someone said, what is it? He said, seems like a great way to make some money, like with emptying PayPal accounts to your own when times are tough. You can't do it to your own. Okay. Not one that you want to keep and use, and if you're doing any kind of business, like you've got to have a clean PayPal account. You can't, as one on the up and up. You can't afford to do this. So, yeah, it's possible. It does occur, but you have to keep recreating PayPal accounts all the time, every time that you really want to do this. And the only times where I've heard other people, and I've talked to some people who have done it successfully, and they've shown me the score. Obviously, I'm not going to tell you who the hell those people are. They only do it with small amounts, like really, really small amounts. It's never like something that you could live off of. So, I mean, unless, you're the kind of person that could live off of very little, which then, like $100, or I don't know, however the hell you pull it off. But regardless, no, all of these, every single fucking one is a scam. And even the rare few that are dealers on other marketplace sites, reputable, and you can at the very least find reputable marketplace sites on Tor, that's for sure. But unless it's like on there, and that's not even a guarantee. Okay. Like it's just, it's such a risk to do it. I mean, again, the logic that why don't they just keep the money? I mean, the logic that, okay, they can only do that so many times because they'd have to go through the same process you're talking about. I mean, imagine the amount of PayPal accounts or other like clone credit cards and other things that these people offer out. If that was all being done by one party, I mean, eventually you're going to hit a brick wall at some point to where you can't use that stuff anymore. And you end up on a radar somewhere. So their logic is sound that, yeah, it does make sense for them to sell this stuff off. But again, it's usually in much smaller amounts. It's not, and it's such a pain in the ass. No, I don't think it's worth it one bit. And even if you happen to find one needle in the haystack, and I mean, it's a big fucking haystack. Yeah, they're bullshit. They're scams. They're just going to take your Bitcoin. You're done. And what a shame, because if you just were able to hold on to your Bitcoin for a little longer, you'd be in much better shape. I mean, like you would make the returns of whatever you thought you could possibly be buying. I mean, there's no guarantee of that. Got to be careful. Legal language, right? Yeah, I mean, again, this does happen. There are quote unquote ones where you do get what you're actually asking for. Like these gift cards, PayPal accounts, clone credit cards, things like this. They do exist. They are a real thing. But I mean, it's risky to do it, but it's even more of a risk, and you'll end up like losing a ton, in my opinion, just on trying to find the legitimate one. And then again, the process, like I just said, the process is such a pain in the ass. I don't think it's worth it. You could say when you find that one, you've hit a gold mine. No, because you're just going to be making account after account, and the amount of time you spend doing all that crap is time you could be making money in other ways. I don't think it's worthwhile. So watch out for any of these. I mean, just don't bother. Okay. And I'm not necessarily saying like that anything unethical is going on. I'm just saying don't bother. Okay. Like it's not even a question of ethics. It's just, it's basically all a scam. Certainly all of these sites that you can go to, it's a scam. Like I said, the only legitimate ones exist on actual marketplaces. And even those they gotta be marketplaces that are legit and that people have actually bought stuff from. And look, I get it. It's a challenge because how do you know, like with these reviewers, the very nature of Tor and of doing this sort of thing is anonymity and privacy, right? So, just inherently, you don't want to know that these people are, whether they're real or not. But then that leads to the problem, right? So it's a catch-22. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, but just don't. Okay. Don't get involved in this. And the risks are just way too high. They're really, really way too high. I mean, even the guy, again, the guy who was listed who was interviewed for that, famous story, I think he was only doing he was just doing gift cards. And I don't mean like Visa and MasterCard gift cards. I mean, just for like websites. And not that that's any kind of like real gray area, I think, within the law, but that's how kind of careful he was being. Okay. Apparently he was doing very well for himself, making a shit ton of money doing that sort of thing. Do I know how that works? How you can do that? Or like how somebody could even like buy those codes and all this stuff. I don't know anything about that process. Not interested. But just understand, even the seller who was legit, was not dealing in, again, clone credit cards, draining PayPal accounts and things like this. Okay. So anyway, I hope that answers your question. Just stay away from them. Stay away from them. They're scams. They're scams. Anything all the ones you see listed off in the Hidden Wiki, there's some valid shit on the Hidden Wiki, no doubt. Okay. And it's tough. I know, because like people want a site like the Hidden Wiki to be able to navigate Tor and get to the good stuff that's on there. But God damn it. Like just don't trust the Hidden Wiki. Okay. Take that away from this, and don't mess with those money services. Just don't. All right. If someone has different opinions on this, if you have something you want to say on the matter, go ahead. In fact, I'll tell you, some of the sites, where I was like looking into them a bit, I even, I straight up told them, because they have their little messaging service. I said, I'm going to let people know you're a goddamn scam. And I mean, I never did a whole episode on it like I wanted to. Basically, like in 2016, or no, it was 2017. In 2017, I had wanted that to be like a year of the dark web, as it were, and like teaching everybody about Tor. Things happened, personal things that, I mean, were not things that like happened to me, but that happened to people in my life that, kept me from doing that deep dive. I am intrigued in revisiting that subject. And so then this kind of stuff would come up again, and maybe I'll talk about it on a main Sovereign Tech episode in the future, because people need to be warned about this. But anyway, there you have it. So we'll stick with that here for now. So let's get on to, so yeah, again, just don't do them. Let's get on to the next question. Okay, this is a nice little middle question, something short, and an entertainment question, which I'm totally open to that. In fact, I'm going to pull up, and I got a great email. The kind of emails I really, frankly, I haven't gotten a whole, I mean, I get lots of emails where people are asking me questions and they're saying, thank you, keep up the great work, etc. In fact, actually, I got an email here that said, just a quick note on biometrics. They'll never survive the 108 megapixel camera. Woo. Well, there's a conversation to have around that. But anyway, and that has references to the last episode, or the most recent episode of Sovereign Tech. There's never going to be a last episode of Sovereign Tech. You know what I mean, baby. Woo. All right. But anyway, it was titled Awesome Podcast. So I have been looking for podcasts to listen to, and I have come across you just recently. I cannot stop listening. Your words stay interesting and entertaining. I wanted to show some thanks for keeping it real and telling it how it should be. A lot of my favorite episodes is your Star Wars ones. Listening to y'all makes, and by y'all, I guess, me and, of course, my brother Rob, listening to y'all makes me want to know more, because I get lost a little when you go through some topics. Because of that, I just started reading the books, which I realize is going to be a lengthy process. Yes, it is. In fact, we'll reread this. Robin and I will reread this on TFR, on TIE Fighter Renegades. And we'll do a deeper dive. I mainly wanted to say thanks for what you do. Your shows are great, and I'm trying to catch up to your new episodes. Oh boy, are you in for? You got a good way to go, baby. But I love getting those kinds of emails, and I'm glad that people are enjoying. I mean, a lot of Zomia One, a lot of the overall network has a lot to do with entertainment, so I don't mind getting entertainment questions. I will field any questions. In fact, I got another email from somebody too, who actually, they had to, for very good reasons. They couldn't keep supporting on Podbean, and they had basically said that, or actually, well, I won't go into all of what they said, but at some point I want to talk about it. But I was really disappointed to hear that if you stop supporting on Podbean, it's not like with Patreon, where it lets you ride out the month. They just instantly cut off your access to the, to new stuff, that comes out. That sucks. That's bad. I'm not pleased about that, but anyway, that's a whole other conversation to get into. But I know other people leave Podbean for other reasons. Maybe they're not getting the content they want. I mean, all you have to do is tell me what you want. And if it's something that I think, I'm the ultimate filter, but I want to give you content that you want. I want to talk about the things you want to ask me about or talk about, whatever. I'm game. And I have a lot of episodes planned for a lot of that stuff, but even just for the Q&As, look, if you don't want me to do, because we've had over the past few months, there have been a few episodes where it was all entertainment. I know that's not everybody's bag. If you want other kinds of stuff, ask me. Okay. And I will get into, whatever you want me to talk about. And especially right now, the question hopper is very low. So you have an excellent chance of your question, whatever it is, tech, whatever, of getting getting featured on an upcoming Q&A. So anyway, I really appreciate that email. I don't know if this person is a subscriber of the Zomia ONE Underground yet, but thank you. I mean, I love getting to hear that. Again, I'm just trying to be entertaining and interesting, entertaining and informative. And if I'm achieving that, I'm a happy guy personally. So, okay. Anyway, so we got an entertainment question here. Let's get into it. Then we got a little bit of a deep dive on another question to get into. And here it is. I think someone asked similar to this recently. But I don't, well, anyway, we'll cover it here. If I did do it before, I apologize. I don't know if my answer is going to be any different here. But I know I talked about something kind of similar to this, or no, it wasn't this question. I remember what it was now. Someone asked me, like, they were just getting into audiobooks. What audiobook series should they start with? And I went into that. But anyway, here's the question. It's very short. What book or book series do you want to see finally come to life on screen, if at all? And I'm glad now this is somebody who listens to everything, because I have made the comment, I have kind of this whole concept that entertainment is dead. I have made the comment that, yeah, I mean, like Babylon 5, my favorite franchise ever. Okay. Like, I mean, I love it more than I love Star Trek. I love it more than Star Wars. It is the cream of the crop. I don't ever want Babylon 5 to get remade. In fact, I don't even know if I want it to get like relaunched in any way to where like there's a new season and things like this. Because if you got to go through the bean counters, and if you have to go through whatever half the shit that comes out of Disney has to go through, I'm going to end up with an inferior product, no matter how hard Straczynski tries. Because, again, there was a time where like television and even movies and all of this, like where you were able to, and with science fiction especially, you were able to sneak in. And this is true for the bulk of science fiction's history up until recently. You were able to sneak in messages, very controversial, perhaps, messages, political messages, into it. And you didn't know, nobody realized it because they thought it was just, aliens and laser guns. And so they didn't realize that maybe there was a heavy, a heavy anti-war message, or a message about, transgender people, or a message about, homosexuality and how they're being oppressed, or racism and things like this. But that's not true anymore. So the idea that I don't really want anything to get made into a movie or a TV show that's not an unfair conclusion for you, the question asker, to think of me, that I would think, because I really can't think of much that I would want to get. I can think of plenty of things that I'd want to see get brought to the silver screen or TV or whatever. Plenty of things I could think of that I would want for that. But I don't want the modern entertainment industry to be the one to do it, because they're just going to fuck it up. I can't see, like, some of the deeper messages of some of this stuff. I absolutely cannot believe they would ever allow on television. My first answer to this would be something that is supposedly coming, even though I haven't heard a whole lot of traction on it, because it was announced maybe a year ago. And I haven't heard any further developments about the matter, just that it was going to happen. And it got announced by arguably the richest man in the world, or who was, that being Jeff Bezos, that on Amazon Prime, they were going to make E&M Banks, they were going to make the Culture series. They were going to do a whole mini-series, or, I don't know, extended series, whatever, of it. Now, I have said in the past, I think there's a reason that, there is definitely a political play being done here on the part of Bezos. Because, again, I think much of Silicon Valley is very supportive of universal basic income, right? Of a UBI. And I think that that's, making the Culture series, just like Mark Zuckerberg 2 years previous to that was doing like a book club, a monthly book club thing. And he said, the book I'm reading this month was the first book in the Culture series. Now, why are they prepping people for that? Because now, here's the funny thing here's the interesting thing. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this because I've already talked about it ad nauseum on Sovereign Tech. The Culture series by E.M. Banks is explicitly anarchist. But it's kind of there's hedonism in it as well. I love the Culture series. I think it has great things to say. I appreciate much of, not all, but much of what it puts on display of what a future spacefaring culture, hence the name, could look like. Okay. And I think Ian Banks is right about a lot of his predictions of what that would look like how that would evolve. But I think the reason they're doing that is because one could argue is that it's very socialist. And I think that's more of what they're pushing. And the idea that the AIs run everything. Silicon Valley wants everything run by algorithms and AI. And that's where they come in supporting the Culture series. I think even Elon Musk has been on with that. And I know you're thinking that he's like anti-AI. Yeah, maybe not so much, but that's another conversation for another time. So, Neuralink, folks, you are not jacking my brain into anything made by Elon Musk or anybody out of Silicon Valley. I'm sorry. No, I'm not sorry at all. It's just not going to happen. So anyway, the Culture series is something I'd like to see come to fruition, come to life. But I bet you, first off, I don't even know if they're going to actually make it. Just announcing it and getting people to look into it might be enough for Jeff Bezos and whoever else's aims, what they want out of producing this, which I just described, or what I theorize. So I don't know if it's ever even going to really become a thing. If it does, I'd put money on it that their mentions of anarchism are not going to be there, or even hints of it. Like, they will twist it. And look, Ian Banks is dead. Okay. He can't defend his work. They will twist it to where there isn't, the anarchism isn't a part of it. That's what's going to happen there, in my opinion. So I'm not excited for that. That is the first one that I would run to as far as what I'd like to see get made. It'd have to be a TV series. You couldn't do a movie. A movie wouldn't be enough. And you have to get kind of like Babylon 5, where you have to get 3 seasons deep before the show suddenly becomes the greatest fucking thing you've ever seen and your mind gets blown. You have to, with a Culture series, TV series, the book series doesn't get great until later on. Okay. So you would have to get, in a TV series, you'd have to get probably 3 seasons deep before you realize just how fucking great these books are, or how great the story is. Okay. So and most people, and this is another reason why I don't want anything getting made into, TV series or movies or whatever, is because most people don't have the patience to wait for something to get great. And this is a problem, with the entertainment industry in general. It is a miracle, for lack of a better term. It is a miracle that Babylon 5, was able to survive to its 3rd season to get to the point where everything just becomes mind fucking blown. I don't know how it did that, but it did. Yeah. So, and that's true. Star Trek shows are usually weak in their first, maybe even 2nd season or whatever. So, that's a thing too. I admit that. So I don't know how shows are able to get that far. Part of how I think that happened in the past was just, I think that whatever, Universal, NBC, ABC, Disney, whoever, they wanted just some kind of science fiction series on the books. Maybe there was some kind of requirement from SAG. I don't know. Who knows how that exactly works, but I think there was just some kind of requirement. Yeah, we need some kind of science fiction on the books, and that way that looks good. And they would just sort of keep it going. And, maybe just luckily one of them would turn into a really great fucking show, whether that had to do with the success of some sci-fi blockbuster in theaters or what, Who knows? So anyway, getting on with the question though. So yeah, the Culture series, sure. I would love for Laurel K. Hamilton's Anita Blake series, which is 30 some odd books deep. I would love to see that get turned into a TV series. You could do movies. You could do a very long movie series with that. But a TV series would be fine too. The reason I don't think that'll ever get made is because, especially with the later books, and that's when the Anita Blake novels get really, really great. I mean, Anita Blake became a big thing because in the 90s, we didn't have, fortunately, I say very fortunately, we didn't have Twilight. We didn't have the Vampire Diaries. We didn't have any of that other shit. Vampire media to consume was fairly rare at the time. And Anita Blake filled in that niche beautifully with science fiction fans or horror fans or whatever. But Anita Blake would end up would shift later on into something that was all about polyamory, orgies, the power of sex, a lot of this other stuff, all of which I think are fine and dandy and, whatever. Rock and roll, have those alternative lifestyles put on display somewhere, for fuck's sake, because the human condition is so dynamic. But because of that, I don't think those aspects, which the fans that are still reading Anita Blake books to this day, that's largely what they love about them. I don't think you're ever going to you'll never be allowed to get that on the screen. It just won't happen, because the state itself and the state and the entertainment industry, like we've talked about in recent episodes of Sovereign Tech, are, they're one. So, I mean, it's the military entertainment industrial complex. Okay. They really won't, well, they're really reliant upon you, getting married and having children. Right. And, married like to one, like they're very much, in fact, I remember I used to have a phrase years ago, the marriage industrial complex, speaking of that, like if you remember the movie, They Live, classic. One of the signs on it is, I mean, everybody knows the obey sign and all this stuff, but one of the signs when you put on the sunglasses that the aliens put there was marry and reproduce, because that's part of what, keeps authoritarianism, very much alive. Now, I'm not saying you can't get married or that you shouldn't have kids. That's not what I'm saying at all. I am just saying, understand that the entertainment industry really is right now very much about, steering the way that people think. I really do believe that. If it's not about steering how they think, it's about being dumb enough that everybody will buy a ticket. Again, this is the mainstream entertainment industry. I know there's indies out there, like myself, who will put out the controversial stuff, who will put out the real avant-garde ideas, or you have something that kind of got grandfathered in, like the Anita Blake novels, where this kind of stuff can get put on display. But I don't think you're going to, if it ever did get made by Hollywood, it would be totally bastardized and wouldn't work. But I would love to see it. If it could be a thing, that'd be hot as hell. It'd be wonderful. The Gore novels by John Norman, another series I would love to see get turned into that. An obvious one to be done is the Foundation series. Apparently that's going to happen somewhere. That's another one where also I haven't really heard everything about it. The Dune movies. I don't think we're going to get a Dune movie past, in fact, we'd be lucky if we get God Emperor of Dune. As much as I want there to be, make all the Dune movies. Fuck yes, do it, please. But I don't think we would ever get to Heretics. I don't think we'd ever get to Chapter House, because there's some really deep shit in that. Deep shit that fucks with authoritarianism, quite frankly, and much of the direction that Silicon Valley wants to go, in my opinion, especially with Dune. So I don't see that getting made. But just as a kindness, okay, I'll give you a couple of book series that I think could actually get made and might not get bastardized too much, because they're not laying out any like really, really major message. So the first one I'll mention is, and maybe Disney just might do this. I wouldn't be surprised. And maybe they do it on Disney Plus. Who knows? But there was a trilogy of books that were published by LucasArts. Okay, not Lucasfilm, LucasArts, which, I mean, it's all, at the time, it was all under George Lucas. And these books came out in the late 90s. And that's the, wait, no, it was Lucasfilm. Sorry, it wasn't LucasArts. It was Lucasfilm. I was thinking of The Dig, that was LucasArts. I'd love to see The Dig as a movie. I think that's a great game, great story. But yeah, this is by Lucasfilm, and it was based off of some of the creatures that were originally going to get used for Star Wars that I don't think ended up getting used, regardless, but it's Lucasfilm's Alien Chronicles. And this was a trilogy. It was by Deborah Chester. There was the Golden One, Crimson Claw, and the Crystal Eye. It has to do with like this gladiator that kind of rises up and, well, I mean, there's somewhat of an anti-authoritarian message, but it goes a lot deeper. Anyway, that book series would be great. I mean, it would really, really be solid as a, as like a movie series. In fact, actually, some of what's in those books, I'm trying to think like a couple of the worlds, I think, and then was it the Oron? Those get mentioned in back in the day in the old Star Wars expanded universe. They used to get mentioned like in the Star Wars encyclopedia and all this. So one could argue that the Alien Chronicles was at least at one point part of the Star Wars universe. I could see where Disney might pick up from that. And it would be an interesting pick because now those books are over 20 years old, which makes me feel very old because I read them as a teenager and I thought they were tremendous. But yeah, that's a book series that I would love to see get done. Another one, and somewhat related to Star Wars also, frankly, but not really Star Wars. That's Timothy Zahn's, of course, Star Wars fans know the name of Timothy Zahn, his Conquerors trilogy that also came out in the 90s, with Lord Kavanaugh and all this. That would be a really, really cool. I know the books, apparently they didn't sell very well. I thought it was an awesome series. Like, I mean, really, really in-depth stuff. Great fighter pilot action kind of stuff in it. I would love to see that get turned into something. And it doesn't have an anti-government message at all. In fact, quite the opposite. That would be something that I think could safely get made into movies. Or even into like a mini series or TV series. I mean, those are really, really big books too. Like they're long. I mean, that's just the way Timothy Zahn usually writes. So I could see that, and I would welcome that. But in general, most things that I would really love to see movies or TV series of, you're right. The question asker is totally on. I never want them to get made. Because I know they're just going to get bastardized, and then some asshat at a convention is going to come up to me, or I'm going to be talking about something, I don't know, like the Culture series or who knows what. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, I saw it. And they completely missed the message that the fucking author was trying to get out there because the TV series or movie, just bastardized it. Okay. I see that's how that is going to work out. Okay. Now we'll end that conversation with that. Let's get into our last question. And this might be this question I might even kind of build into a second part into a future Q&A. Okay, here we go. So, hey, sexiest man alive. I've recently been researching the Protestant Reformation, and I know you've talked a lot about it years ago on the show and how it relates to the Enlightenment. Basically, that Enlightenment figures were trying to prove the glory of God, quote unquote, but ended up proving science and atheism/deism instead. Okay. I kind of want to talk about just for a second on that part. So yes, this is something that I've said many times over the years, and that basically, the Enlightenment, okay, which was a, 17th century and so on movement, okay, the Enlightenment did come out of scientists trying to prove God, but then basically finding out there was no need for a God. And this led to sort of the blind watchmaker argument, which was deism. However, I do want to bring up that while a lot of people argue for basically the religion of the Enlightenment was deism, I think that it created a lot of atheists who were just afraid to go that far. And you might understand more of why they were afraid to go that far in a minute. But anyway, yes, that is what I've been espousing. So reading on, and that sexiest man alive comment. Thank you. So John Calvin seems to be the big daddy when it comes to the Reformation, along with Martin Luther. I guess I'm trying to square away how such a strict religious teacher like Calvin could have influenced science as we know it today. I would assume more that he'd be an anti-science figure if he were around in more modern times. Keep up the great work, stud. Woo, all right. Well, yeah, John Calvin. Boy, this is a conversation to fucking have. John Calvin himself. Okay, this is a guy. All right, you have to understand something about the Reformation. Let's kind of break this down. The modern world as we have it, with all of its, great things and all of its flaws, which there are many, is really a byproduct. And I do say a byproduct of three events. Okay, you could add in 4 or 5, but I'm going to make it clean to 3. What you had is like in the 12th century or so, and for a couple hundred years after that, you basically had the Florentine Renaissance. You had the Renaissance. The Renaissance led the bourgeois, the influencers, be that, the aristocrats or the oligarchs, whoever had the power, be it because of money, religious position, political position. It led them, and not so much the religious folks, but regardless, it led them to rediscovering the history of the world that they lived in, big chunk of Europe, in what was being discovered in Roman times. So there was a rediscovery of human history, very, very real rediscovery that happened during the Renaissance. Okay. And human civilization started to pick back up from where the Romans left off at this point. Okay. Now we could get into, this question wasn't about the Renaissance, which really got started by a guy named Christolorus. Okay. But, from the Byzantine Empire, but that's a whole other conversation that we can get into. You can ask me about it if you want, but that's something I have to get into another time. But you had the Renaissance that got people interested in, again, really in life on Earth. Because until the Renaissance, the concentration, and one could argue the reason why, in fact, Edward Gibbons, who wrote one of the major histories of Rome, would argue this as well. The reason why Rome fell wasn't because the Visigoths came over the hill. It was because Christianity pushed people to thinking that this world doesn't matter. It's the heavenly life or the afterlife that is what really matters. So people stopped worrying about, quote unquote, real life or the present life on Earth. And I don't think that's an unfair thing to say. But what happened during the Renaissance is people became basically interested again in the real world, in real life, not the afterlife. Not that they were anti-religious or anything. That necessarily wasn't happening. But regardless, there was a reconcentration. I mean, that kind of was happening, but nobody went that far at that point. But there was a reconcentration on the real world. Now, this leads to people exploring and, thinking logically and all of this. This leads to later, the Renaissance leads to what, a couple hundred years later, 300-400 years later, whatever, leads to the Reformation. Okay. And because of this, just exploring the beauty of the human condition and the beauty of life, which really was happening. Okay. And that's a key concept to understand, is exploring the beauty of life, because this is one of the things that I think would inspire Martin Luther, who is easily the biggest figure, certainly even bigger than John Calvin, in the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther doesn't get enough credit, I think. And I'm not saying he was a great guy. He was an anti-Semite. I mean, there's all kinds of problems with Martin Luther. But he is easily one of the pivotal figures in human history. Maybe as important as Alexander the Great. I mean, Martin Luther didn't conquer land, but he conquered almost every mind in, for lack of a better way of putting it, because I think this phrase has a problem. He conquered every mind in the Western world, or at least a good chunk of them, quite a few million, and quite a few wars would start over that man. But he could only come to his conclusions because of the respect for life in this world. Okay. And I'm not going to get into, a big deep dive on that part. But basically what happens is, with characters like John Calvin, Martin Luther, Zwingli, some others, is there is this exploration of, wait a minute. Yeah, Christianity, okay, which at the time everybody was, or more or less everybody was Catholic. Not everybody. I might touch on that. I'll talk about the Waldensians. Okay. But basically Christianity was not respecting, or what Martin Luther and others would conclude, and I'm being very broad here. There's never just one reason. There's always a bunch of reasons. Okay. They would conclude that Catholicism, as it stood then, was not understanding of the human condition. Okay. And because it didn't understand the human condition, it must not understand God very well, because God, if anything, even if you've never read the Bible, the concept you were constantly told was that God is love and Jesus is salvation, right? Even though you would have the edict of there's no salvation outside of the church, right? That being the Catholic Church. Well, that's something Martin Luther would end up standing against as part of his 95 Thesis and so on. So these characters, Martin Luther, John Calvin, and so on, would start to explore and start to question a lot of the edicts from Rome, a lot of the edicts from the Pope, from the Catholic Church, and whatever council existed at the time. And what ended up happening is this got a lot of people very excited. Okay, a lot of the the peasants, okay, were very excited about what was being described, and they felt like they were being disseminated truth that, say, the priests never would. Again, there's more to it. It is a far more complex situation than this, but I'm just being very broad. And all of that would come out of the beauty that Renaissance artists and Renaissance thinkers were describing about life itself, that life can be enjoyable and good here on Earth. And you don't have to just, toil and broil or whatever, on Earth to have a good life in heaven, that you could have a good life right now. And so much of what Luther and Calvin had to say really spoke to that. And it really did. Even though they certainly had plenty of their own dogmas and everything else that one could argue was actually not making life on Earth the good life, but they ended up getting a lot of political support because their ideas were winning over the people. And when you win over the people, you can challenge the powers that be at the time. And the powers that be were the Holy Roman Empire, that being the Pope. And so a lot of princes, Germany and whatever country that the Reformation was happening, be it in Switzerland, a lot of what John Calvin was doing was happening in Geneva. These, it's still authoritarians, but these authoritarians would see this as an opportunity to wrest power away from the church, to wrest power away from the Catholic Church. And so that's how it ends up becoming why it gets so well funded, because you end up with the 30 Years' War, you end up with all these religious wars. It was just, it was insane what was happening. People were just, and laws were being disregarded right and left. Like, what was it like this? There was one part of it I remember where basically, like in Paris, there was a law in France that in Paris, and we're talking, this is in the 16th century, there was a law that no army was allowed into the city. The Pope didn't care. The Pope said, no, go into the city and start slaughtering everybody. And fuck, they did. There was no safe haven, no matter what major city you thought you were in that was somehow protected or that the rule of law mattered. Oh, no. Not when it comes to messing with, the Most High. Yeah, it was a bad time. But anyway, this idea was, John Calvin and a lot of the Protestant reformers, the Protestant Reformation. Now that's part 2 of that trilogy that I mentioned, because the Reformation would absolutely inspire the Enlightenment. And we'll get into that, okay, in a second. But the Protestant Reformation would lead to, you also had the Gutenberg press coming out at the time, right? And Luther would publish his Bible that people could actually read in German. They didn't have to learn Latin. They didn't have to get a special copy of the Vulgate, from the Vatican or something. It would inspire people to read for themselves and to learn for themselves. Calvin would go on to found, universities, all different libraries, all kinds of institutions that the everyday person was able to get access to. And so while the Renaissance started showing people why you can have the good life on Earth, the Protestant Reformation, as flawed as that was, and believe me, John Calvin was a flawed motherfucker, would end up inspiring people to learn, and would inspire people to not just appreciate life, but even show them how, and make them get them to question things, and to want autonomy, and to enjoy individuality and so much. Now, I mean, look, there's bad things that would come out of it too. Like more the Puritan work ethic would frankly come out of, John Calvin would basically espouse that. So it's not like they ended up with the good life out of the Protestant Reformation, but it was a stepping stone to getting to the real scientific revolution that would end up happening, during the Enlightenment, quite frankly. So I guess maybe the simplest way to say it, that John Calvin really inspired the scientific revolution that would occur, is that he inspired truth-seeking. He did create universities that would play a pivotal role in the European Enlightenment, years later. I would argue Martin Luther was just as big a deal in all of this. It's not just like John Calvin. It's not like just one guy did this, but that hunger for truth, giving people the tools, which John Calvin and other Protestant reformers did, giving them the tools and maybe most importantly, the permission to think outside of what the Catholic Church said was code and rule, just changed everything. It really did. It changed it all. And again, there's so many problems with the stuff that like Calvin put out there. Like, the idea of predestination, that there was a very select elect. And look, the Protestant Reformation, one of the easy ways that it was sold was that the Catholic Church started killing anybody that spoke out against the Catholic Church. As soon as the Protestants had any kind of power, the Protestants started fighting within each other. The Baptists and the Anabaptists ended up fighting between each other. Calvin would order the death of, Michael Serveticus, and so on. It's nuts. It's not like it got necessarily any better there, but it did start the ball rolling of questioning everything. And, and again, fortunately, the tools were starting to exist and the framework had started to exist to do this, and even to have the desire to, because the Renaissance was showing that you could have the good life on earth. So this ends up without, in my opinion, both without the Renaissance, you wouldn't have the Protestant Reformation. Without the Protestant Reformation, you would have never had the Enlightenment. Without the Enlightenment, you would have never had the scientific revolution and the, science that we have, and then really the entire world, the technological world and so on that we have today. It just wouldn't have happened. And I don't think that you would have even had people like Isaac Newton, go down the list of all the Enlightenment figures. They would have never have had the guts or the balls or the tools to even begin to let's explore the nature of God, and then maybe come to the conclusions, even though Newton wouldn't be one of these guys, but maybe come to the conclusions that, wait, do we even need a God? Is that something that the universe precludes? Or is a prerequisite? Maybe not. So that you have to understand that trilogy of events for what it is. Now, the Enlightenment, I think, would actually get stalled, and it wouldn't go all the way, because especially when you read from earlier Enlightenment figures, you can tell. Guys like Francis Bacon and some others, you can tell they are getting to a point where they're effectively saying to themselves, yeah, we don't need these monarchs, and, maybe we don't. They were basically going to end up becoming anarchists. And I think that there are points even in the 19th century, where the anarchist movements that were happening at the time, even if you disagree with them, like anarcho-syndicalists or, egoists or individualist anarchists and so on, they were the natural outcropping of the Enlightenment. Because that's how far it goes when you start questioning everything, right? You become anarchists, that's what I'd argue you're born anyway. But that's how far it goes. But that would get quashed. And I would dare say that probably there's never just one reason, but that effectively would get quashed by the World Wars. And where people would think, no, we need governments because holy shit, we can't let this kind of thing happen again, even though what allowed the World Wars to happen, World War I, World War II, and so on, was really the fact that there are governments. But yeah, without John Calvin being there, setting up a systematized way of thinking, even though it wasn't, the scientific method, but a new systematized way of thinking that allowed for exploration and questioning and self-learning away from the Catholic Church, which their order of the day at the time was, you think what we want you to think and you do what we say. That's what allowed science to even become a thing. Otherwise, and I know people can bring up that, well, but the Catholic Church supported, had like the monks were the scientists of their day. They were the ones preserving knowledge and all this. Well, they didn't do a good a job as, what was happening over in the Byzantine Empire, like what Christolorus brought over during the Renaissance and so on. Okay. I understand that. I understand that today, much of Catholicism supports a lot of concepts that I would say were byproducts that came out of the Protestant Reformation and the Enlightenment. But understand those are modern things. Okay. And that's a more modern, look, even within Catholicism, you have a civil war, right? You have the Sedevacantists, and then you have the people who think that the Second Vatican Council was totally legitimate and real. Because there's a Catholicism that, if you go read up on the Second Vatican Council, and you're going to see how before that time, in middle of the 20th century, before then, there was a Catholic Church that was one way, and then there was a Catholic Church that was a completely different way. The Second Vatican Council version of the Catholic Church is very different than the pre-Second Vatican Council Catholic Church. Very, very fucking different. So, if you want to making arguments for, well, no, the Catholic Church espouses this. Sure, they do now, but they sure as hell didn't then. And you can just look at the history of the Reformation and you're going to see just how fucking brutal they were. Were the Protestant reformers much better? Not necessarily. But they at least allowed for a certain freedom of thought that would eventually bring on the Enlightenment, which itself would bring on the modern scientific revolution that we have. And even then, of course, an interesting thing to bring up is that, while the Renaissance was looking back to Rome and was re-exploring the history of Europe or the history of that area through, ancient Rome, and what ancient Rome was bringing to light, which there were some very impressive things, no doubt about that. It's interesting to note that the Enlightenment thinkers and scientists of their day thought that they were rediscovering once again, just like the Renaissance was rediscovering. The Enlightenment thought that they were rediscovering not like true Christianity, like John Calvin would think he was doing, or Martin Luther thought he was doing, during the Reformation. But they thought they were rediscovering ancient knowledge that maybe the Egyptians had, or even somebody before the Egyptians. That's what they thought they were doing. They never thought. And that's a fascinating thing to consider in itself, is that these three major movements in the quote unquote Western world, even though I hate that phrase, these three major events that happen. And again, there's other major events that occurred, the schism, in the 10th or in the 11th century and so on. Those are other things that certainly the three events I listed off couldn't exist without those happening. But schism being, when you ended up with the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church becoming two separate entities. But it's interesting to consider that these three events in themselves didn't really consider them, they didn't consider themselves revolutions. They thought they were just moments of rediscovery. In the Renaissance, they were rediscovering their, the people's history with ancient Rome. In the Reformation, they thought they were rediscovering a primitive Christianity, a truer Christianity that got bastardized by the Catholic Church. And with the Enlightenment, they thought that they were rediscovering knowledge that humanity had thousands of years previous. And unfortunately, and I think, well, with the Reformation, the idea that they were finding some kind of primitive Christianity, no. Okay, that's not true. But with the other two, there's a lot of truth to it. And with the Enlightenment thinkers, I think they were really onto something, that there was knowledge, scientific knowledge, that was getting rediscovered that was known earlier on, much earlier on, thousands of years ago in human history. It's not aliens. Even though the concept of aliens would finally become something that would get discussed and become somewhat acceptable during the Enlightenment era. Okay, but not aliens, but that humans knew a lot more than what the Catholic Church claimed that they knew. And I think that that is one of those many things that the positive aspects, because there are dark aspects of the Enlightenment, but the positive aspects of the Enlightenment that ended up either getting quashed or just ignored and not further explored. And I think that that needs a lot more exploration, and I enjoy doing it on a personal level. So there you have it. That's how John Calvin, just the idea that even though he didn't really allow for complete freedom of thought, because like I said, there was people that he did and wanted put to death because they disagreed with him. But he opened up Pandora's box of free thought. And that led, again, to the scientific revolution and to so much more. Or, yeah, there it is. So anyway, okay, I got to wrap this baby up. Let's get into, and if you have any more questions on what I had said there, go ahead and ask. Get in at bbs@sovereigntech.com, or, you can comment in the Podbean app, whatever it takes, go for it. Now let's talk about our album of the week quick, and I'm going to be very quick with it. And it is by a band that's been around for a good long while. They're from Germany, power metal band called Electro-Calvinistic. And they came out with an album called M.E.T.A.L, and it's an acronym. I haven't exactly figured out what the acronym means yet, but it's just came out 2019. This is very fresh. This is a solid little album. I've liked Electro-Calvinistic's production levels haven't always been the best. But I dig their music, and it opens right up. In fact, it opens up with a song called 111, just kind of an intro thing. But then the second song is Spirit of Daedalus. Kick-ass little track. There's a lot of great stuff on this. You could say it's run-of-the-mill, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was a solid album from them. Not necessarily their best, but a solid power metal album if you want that. Something good that'll get you by for an hour in the gym. It will certainly do that for you. So Freedom Call, M.E.T.A.L, check that out. And I always like these kinds of albums that, like praise metal for metal's sake. They're kind of it's kind of navel gazing, I guess you could say in a way, but I don't know. I dig it. And this is one of those albums. It reminds me of some of what, like Kiss and Dynamite would do, where they sing songs about metal. I know there's plenty of other bands that do this sort of thing that are really a lot of fun. So this is some of that stuff. They know who their audience is. They know who they're selling to. And I dig it. So Freedom Call, M.E.T.A.L, again, that's an acronym. So there's a period after each letter in metal, but I dig it. M.E.T.A.L. Give it a listen. I think you'll like it. Anyway, Sovereign Tech, the main episode of Sovereign Tech might end up coming out a day late this week, just because of my really hectic schedule these days because of certain changes and everything. But here is your Q&A for this week. You are going to get a Q&A this coming Wednesday. Get ready for it, baby. I will see all of you on the other side.